when human junk technology humbled an alien empire. The salvage vessel Resilience drifted through the Kepler 442 debris field like a mechanical vulture, her hull scarred by countless encounters with twisted metal and superheated plasma residue. Captain Marcus Santos stood on the bridge, watching his crew methodically harvest the technological corpses of a dozen civilizations that had once clashed in this forgotten corner of space. The ancient battlefield stretched for millions of kilometers, a graveyard of ambition where empires had bled their secrets into the void. Another Zephyrian power core coming aboard, Captain. Chief Engineer Kowalski's voice crackled through the comm, tinged with the excitement that always accompanied a particularly valuable find. This one still got about 60% charge, should integrate nicely with the hegemony targeting system we pulled last week. Santos nodded, his weathered face reflecting the blue glow of the tactical display. At 52, he'd spent more than half his life in the salvage trade, learning to read the stories written in twisted hull plating and scattered components. Each piece of debris whispered secrets, how it died, what killed it, and most importantly, how its technology could be repurposed. The Resilience wasn't just a salvage ship. She was a synthesis of 100 different engineering philosophies, a testament to humanity's greatest strength, adaptation. The bridge around him hummed with hybrid technology that would have baffled the original designers of any single component. Altarian neural interfaces fed data to Centauri processing cores, while vegan energy conduits powered systems that had never been meant to work together. Yet somehow, under Kowalski's genius and Santos's intuitive understanding of technological harmony, they did. Captain, his sensor operator, Lieutenant Chen, looked up from her console with a frown. I'm detecting a massive energy signature approaching from the Cygnus vector. Configuration unknown, but the power output is significant. Santos felt his stomach tighten. In 30 years of salvage work, significant power signatures rarely brought good news. How significant? Dreadnought class, sir, maybe larger. The main display shifted to show a contact accelerating toward their position with the kind of casual arrogance that spoke of overwhelming firepower. Santos had seen enough warships to recognize the signs. This wasn't a patrol vessel or escort. This was something that expected the universe to move out of its way. All hands, this is the captain, Santos announced over the ship's comm. Secure salvage operations and prepare for potential contact. I want our defensive systems online but not actively scanning. Let's not appear threatening until we know what we're dealing with. The approaching vessel resolved on their screens like a crystalline nightmare. The ship, if it could be called that, resembled a massive geode that had been stretched and weaponized, its faceted hull catching and refracting the distant starlight into prismatic rainbows. Weapon ports gleamed like dark eyes along its surface, and energy readings suggested power generation capabilities that dwarfed anything in human space. Incoming transmission, Chen reported. Audio only, but the harmonics are unusual. Put it through. The bridge filled with a sound like crystal wind chimes caught in a hurricane, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Gradually, the harmonics resolved into something resembling language, though the translation matrix struggled with the alien syntax. Inferior organic entities, the voice resonated with crystalline precision, each word carefully modulated for maximum condescension. You contaminate this space with your primitive scavenging. The Vel'thari claim dominion over this sector. Withdraw your pathetic vessel immediately or face the consequences of trespassing in our territory. Santos exchanged glances with his bridge crew. In 3 decades of salvage work, he dealt with pirates, corporate security, and even the occasional military patrol. But this was different. The alien's tone carried the kind of absolute certainty that came from never having been challenged. Open a channel, Santos ordered, straightening his shoulders. This is Captain Marcus Santos of the salvage vessel Resilience. This debris field has been unclaimed for over 3 centuries. We're operating under standard salvage protocols recognized by the Galactic Commerce Authority. I'm afraid I can't simply abandon our operation on your word alone. The harmonic response came immediately, sharp with irritation. Your primitive authorities hold no sway here, scavenger. The Vel'thari recognize no organic law. You collect refuse, broken fragments of inferior technologies. We require this space for our own purposes. Depart now or be removed. Santos felt his jaw clench. He'd built his reputation on being reasonable, on finding diplomatic solutions that avoided unnecessary conflict. But something about the alien's dismissive tone, the casual way it referred to his crew's life work as refuse, struck a nerve he hadn't known was exposed. "Kowalski," he said quietly, activating his private comm channel. "What's our current defensive status?" "All systems green, Captain," came the immediate reply. "The new hegemony shields are integrated with the Altarian phase generators. Should give us some interesting options if things get ugly. Plus, I've been working on a little surprise with those Zephyrian power cores." "Define little surprise." "Remember that Kithurian disruptor array we salvaged last month? The one everyone said was impossible to power. Well, turns out if you route 3 Zephyrian cores through a Centauri harmonic amplifier." Santos felt a grim smile tug at his lips. Kowalski's impossible projects had saved their lives more than once. "Keep it warm, Chief. I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get." The Vel'thari vessel had closed to within 50,000 kilometers, its crystalline hull now clearly visible in all its alien majesty. Santos could see smaller craft detaching from the dreadnought fighters or scouts, their faceted forms dancing through space with an almost organic grace. "Captain Santos," the alien voice returned, now carrying harmonics that suggested barely controlled anger. "Your continued presence demonstrates the typical organic failing of poor judgment. We offer one final opportunity for withdrawal, refuse, and experience the superiority of Vel'thari technology." Santos stood, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture his crew had learned to recognize. It meant their captain had made a decision, and that decision usually involved doing something that looked suicidal but somehow worked out. "Chief Kowalski," Santos said, his voice carrying clearly across the bridge, "I think it's time our crystalline friends learned something about human engineering philosophy." "Which philosophy would that be, sir?" "That there's no such thing as junk, only components waiting for the right application." The first Vel'thari attack came without further warning, a lance of pure energy that would have vaporized any conventional vessel. Instead, it struck the Resilience's shields and simply disappeared. The Altarian phase generators, designed for stealth operations, had been modified to shift incoming energy into subspace, where it dissipated harmlessly. "Impossible," the alien voice carried new harmonics confusion mixed with the first hint of concern. "Your primitive vessel should be debris." "Funny thing about primitives," Santos replied, settling into his command chair with the calm of a man who'd faced death so many times it had become a professional acquaintance. "We have this habit of making things work that shouldn't. Kowalski, let's show them what happens when you combine hegemony targeting systems with Zephyrian power distribution." The Resilience had never been designed as a warship. Her hull was a patchwork of salvaged plating, her weapons systems cobbled together from a dozen different manufacturers. But as she opened fire, the Vel'thari learned the difference between designed elegance and evolved efficiency. Plasma bolts that shifted frequency mid-flight, confusing the alien point-defense systems. Missile swarms that split into submunitions using 3 different guidance protocols simultaneously. Energy beams that phased in and out of normal space, bypassing shields that had been designed to stop conventional attacks. The Vel'thari fighters moved like liquid crystal, their formations perfect. their tactics textbook examples of coordinated assault. They were beautiful, deadly, and completely unprepared for weapons that didn't follow any recognizable pattern. Their shields are adapting, Chen reported, her fingers dancing across her console. But slowly. They're trying to counter each weapon system individually instead of recognizing the hybrid nature. That's the problem with perfection, Santos observed, watching as another wave of Vel'thari fighters fell to weapons that shouldn't have existed. It doesn't know how to deal with chaos. The dreadnought itself had begun to maneuver, its massive bulk surprisingly graceful as it brought heavier weapons to bear. Energy discharges that could have cracked a moon struck the Resilience's shields, but the hybrid defensive systems held, distributing the load across multiple absorption matrices. Captain, Kowalski's voice carried a note of professional pride. I think it's time for the main event. The Cathurian disruptor is fully charged. Santos nodded. The Cathurians had been extinct for 2 millennia, their empire reduced to scattered ruins and incomprehensible technology. The disruptor array they'd salvaged had been considered a curiosity, a weapon system so advanced that no one could figure out how to power it. Leave it to Kowalski to solve a 2,000-year-old engineering problem with spare parts and stubbornness. Fire when ready, Chief. The effect was immediate and devastating. The disruptor beam, invisible to conventional sensors, struck the Vel'thari dreadnought and simply turned off its shields. Not overwhelmed them, not penetrated them, turned them off. The crystalline vessel suddenly found itself naked in space, its perfect defenses reduced to expensive decoration. What? How? The alien voice carried harmonics of genuine shock. That technology is impossible, the power requirements alone. Chief, Santos said conversationally, would you care to explain to our guests how we solve the power requirements? Kowalski's voice carried the satisfaction of an engineer whose impossible project had just worked perfectly. Well, sir, it turns out that if you route 3 Zephyrian power cores through a Centauri harmonic amplifier, you can create a resonance cascade that temporarily exceeds the theoretical maximum output by about 400%. Course, it burns out the cores, but we've got plenty of spares. The Vel'thari dreadnought was retreating now, its escort fighters forming a protective screen around their suddenly vulnerable flagship. Santos could imagine the confusion aboard the alien vessel, their perfect technology defeated by what they dismissed as primitive scavenging. This is impossible, the alien voice repeated, the harmonics now carrying what sounded almost like panic. Your species lacks the sophistication for such synthesis. These technologies were never meant to function together. That's where you're wrong, Santos replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who'd spent his life proving the impossible was merely improbable. They were never meant to function together by their original designers, but we're not their original designers. We're humans. We take what works, fix what doesn't, and make it all play nice together. The standoff stretched for several hours, the Vel'thari fleet maintaining position at the edge of weapons range, while their commanders presumably tried to process what had just happened. Santos used the time to have his crew conduct what he euphemistically called aggressive maintenance, checking systems, rotating power cores, and generally preparing for the next round of impossible things they might need to accomplish. Captain, Chen reported, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching. Looks like our crystalline friends called for backup. Santos nodded grimly. He'd expected this. The Vel'thari struck him as the kind of species that would rather escalate than admit they'd underestimated someone. How many? 12 additional contacts, various sizes. Looks like a full battle group. Kowalski, Santos activated his comm. Please tell me you've got more impossible tricks up your sleeve. Always, Captain. Though I should mention that little demonstration with the Cathurian disruptor used up most of our spare power cores. We've got maybe 2 more shots like that before we're back to conventional weapons. Santos considered their options. The Resilience was tough, but she wasn't invincible. Against a full Vel'thari battle group, even their hybrid technology would eventually be overwhelmed. Unless... Chief, what would happen if we used the Altarian phase generators not for defense, but for offense? There was a pause that Santos had learned to interpret as Kowalski's mind racing through engineering possibilities. Well, sir, theoretically we could phase shift our weapons' fire to bypass their shields entirely. Course, the power requirements would be enormous, and there's a non-zero chance we'd accidentally phase shift ourselves into a parallel dimension. Define non-zero. Maybe 15%. Santos grinned. In his experience, 15% odds of dimensional displacement were practically a guarantee of success. Do it. The Vel'thari reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls gleaming like a constellation of artificial stars. 13 dreadnoughts and twice as many escorts, enough firepower to sterilize a planet. They moved with the coordinated precision of a species that had never known defeat, their formations textbook examples of overwhelming force. Organic scavengers. A new voice joined the communication channel, its harmonics carrying the weight of absolute authority. I am High Admiral Vel'thari of the Vel'thari hegemony. Your vessel will surrender immediately, or face the combined might of our battle fleet. Santos studied the tactical display, noting the aliens' positioning. They'd formed a perfect sphere around the Resilience, every angle covered, every escape route blocked. It was a masterpiece of tactical deployment, assuming your enemy played by conventional rules. High Admiral, Santos replied, his voice carrying the respectful tone of one professional addressing another. I appreciate the impressive display of force, but I'm afraid I can't surrender my ship. We've got a schedule to keep, and this salvage operation isn't finished. Your defiance is illogical, Vel'thari responded. You face 13 dreadnoughts with a single salvage vessel. Surrender now, and your crew will be permitted to live as our servants. Refuse and be destroyed. Kowalski, Santos said quietly, are the phase shift modifications ready? Aye, sir. Though I should mention that the power drain is going to be significant. We'll have maybe 30 seconds of phase-shifted weapons before the system overloads. Then we'd better make those 30 seconds count. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations, though most analysts would conclude that the official reports had to be exaggerated. No single vessel, regardless of technological advantages, could engage 13 dreadnoughts and emerge victorious. The mathematics simply didn't support it. The mathematics, however, hadn't accounted for human ingenuity. The Resilience opened fire with every weapon system she possessed, but the energy beams and projectiles that emerged from her hull existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. They were there and not there, real and unreal, occupying the same space as the Vel'thari shields while somehow not interacting with them. The first dreadnought died before its crew understood what was happening. Phase-shifted plasma bolts materialized inside its hull, bypassing every defensive system the Vel'thari had ever conceived. The crystalline vessel's perfect armor became a liability as the superheated plasma found every structural weakness, every critical system, every command node. Impossible, Vel'thari's voice carried harmonics of genuine terror. Your weapons are striking through our shields. This violates the fundamental laws of physics. Funny thing about laws, Santos replied, watching as a second dreadnought succumbed to weapons that shouldn't exist. They're more like guidelines when you really understand how they work. The Vel'thari fleet tried to adapt, their formations shifting as commanders attempted to counter an attack that made no tactical sense. Some vessels attempted to ram the Resilience, only to find their hulls passing harmlessly through the human ship as Kowalski extended the phase shift field around their entire vessel. 20 seconds of power remaining, Kowalski reported, his voice tight with concentration. The phase generators are redlining, and I'm pretty sure we just violated several conservation laws. Santos nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. 7 Vel'thari dreadnoughts were gone, their crystalline hulls reduced to expanding clouds of superheated debris. The remaining 6 had pulled back, their perfect formations broken by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of engagement. 10 seconds, Kowalski warned. That's enough, Santos decided. Shut it down, Chief. I think we've made our point. The phase shift field collapsed, returning the resilience to normal space with a sensation like reality snapping back into focus. The surviving Vel'thari vessels hung motionless in space, their crews presumably trying to process what they'd just witnessed. High Admiral Vel'thari, Santos said, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who just redefined the possible. I believe we need to discuss salvage rights. The negotiations took place aboard the Resilience, partly because Santos refused to leave his ship, and partly because the Vel'thari seemed genuinely curious about human technology. High Admiral Vel'thari materialized on the bridge in a shimmer of crystalline light, not a hologram, but some form of quantum projection that allowed her consciousness to inhabit a temporary crystalline matrix. She was beautiful in the way that geometric perfection was beautiful, all angles and refracting surfaces, her form shifting between states of matter as her emotions influenced her molecular structure. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of grudging respect mixed with intellectual curiosity. Your species defies classification, she admitted, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that Santos's translation matrix interpreted as confusion. We have studied your technology, your methods, your apparent randomness. By all logical analysis, your systems should not function, yet they do. How? Santos gestured around the bridge, where hybrid technology hummed with quiet efficiency. Because we don't see technology as perfect or imperfect, we see it as adaptable. Every piece of equipment on this ship came from somewhere else, was designed for something else built by someone else, but we made it ours. But the incompatibilities, Vel'thari's form shifted, her confusion deepening. The power requirements, the interface protocols, the fundamental differences in engineering philosophy. How do you reconcile such chaos? Chief Engineer Kowalski chose that moment to enter the bridge, his coveralls stained with lubricants from a dozen different worlds, his hands carrying the calluses of a man who'd spent his life making impossible things work. He looked at the crystalline alien with the same expression he used for particularly challenging engineering problems. Ma'am, he said respectfully, with respect, you're thinking about it wrong. You see chaos where we see potential. Every technology has something to offer, maybe not what it was designed for, but something. The trick is finding the connections, the places where different systems can talk to each other. Vel'thari's form pulsed with what the translation matrix interpreted as fascination. Show me. For the next several hours, Kowalski led the Vel'thari admiral through the Resilience, explaining how Altarian neural interfaces could be modified to accept Centauri data protocols, how Zephyrian power cores could be harmonic tuned to match hegemony weapon systems, how technologies separated by millennia and light years could be convinced to work together. Your approach is inelegant, Vel'thari observed, watching Kowalski demonstrate how a Cathurian processing core had been jury-rigged to interface with human control systems. But effective. You sacrifice perfection for adaptability. Perfection is overrated, Santos said, joining them in the engineering section. Perfect systems can't evolve, can't adapt, can't surprise you when you need them most. Our technology isn't perfect, but it's alive in a way that perfect systems never can be. The Vel'thari admiral was quiet for a long moment, her crystalline form cycling through colors that had no human equivalent. When she spoke, her voice carried new harmonics, something that might have been humility. We have made an error in judgment, she admitted. We saw your chaotic methods and assumed inferiority. We failed to recognize that chaos, properly directed, can achieve what order cannot. So, Santos said, about those salvage rights. The agreement they reached would reshape interstellar politics for generations. The Vel'thari would retain territorial claims to the Kepler 442 system, but human salvage operations would continue under a joint venture arrangement. More importantly, the two species would begin a technology exchange program, Vel'thari precision and efficiency, combined with human adaptability and innovation. Your species has taught us something valuable, Vel'thari said as the negotiations concluded. We believed that technological superiority meant technological purity. We see now that true advancement comes from synthesis, from the willingness to combine disparate elements into something greater than the sum of its parts. Santos nodded, watching through the bridge viewports as Vel'thari engineering teams worked alongside his crew to catalog the debris field. The crystalline beings moved with their characteristic precision, but now they paused to examine human modifications, to ask questions about adaptation techniques, to learn. There's something else, Vel'thari added, her form shifting to what Santos had learned indicated deep thought. Our databases contain references to other species civilizations that fell because they could not adapt, could not synthesize, could not evolve beyond their original limitations. Your approach, it may be the key to survival in a universe that constantly changes. Maybe, Santos replied. Or maybe we just got lucky. Either way, I'm glad we could work this out without anyone else getting vaporized. The Vel'thari admiral's form pulsed with what the translation matrix interpreted as amusement. Indeed. Though I confess, I am curious to see what your chief engineer will accomplish with access to our harmonic resonance technology. Santos grinned. Chief Kowalski with access to new technology is either the best thing that could happen to the galaxy or the most dangerous, possibly both. 6 months later, the Resilience hung in orbit around New Geneva, humanity's primary shipbuilding facility. But she was no longer alone. Alongside her floated a dozen other vessels, some human, some Vel'thari, some that defied easy classification. The joint technology program had exceeded everyone's expectations, producing ships that combined the best of both species' engineering philosophies. Captain Santos stood in his ready room, reviewing reports from salvage operations across 3 sectors. The Vel'thari had proven to be excellent partners, their precision and analytical capabilities perfectly complementing human intuition and adaptability. More importantly, they'd learned to see value in what they'd once dismissed as chaos. Captain, Kowalski's voice came through the comm, carrying the excitement that always accompanied a breakthrough. You need to see this. The new hybrid drive system is ready for testing. Santos made his way to the engineering section, where Kowalski stood before a device that looked like it had been designed by a committee of mad scientists from 6 different species. Crystalline Vel'thari components interfaced seamlessly with human control systems, while power conduits that shifted between states of matter fed energy to a drive core that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. What exactly does it do? Santos asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Well, sir, Kowalski grinned. Remember how we used to think faster-than-light travel was limited by the fundamental structure of spacetime? Turns out that's only true if you insist on staying in one dimension at a time. Santos felt that familiar mixture of pride and terror that came with Kowalski's more ambitious projects. Chief, please tell me you haven't invented a way to accidentally destroy the universe. Oh no, sir. Well, probably not. The Vel'thari harmonic calculations suggest only a 12% chance of catastrophic dimensional collapse. Santos laughed, remembering his first encounter with the crystalline aliens and their dismissal of human primitive scavenging. They'd learned better, just as humanity had learned to appreciate the value of precision and order. The universe was vast and full of wonders, But the greatest wonder of all was the endless capacity for growth, adaptation, and synthesis. 12% odds of destroying reality, Santos mused. In my experience, Chief, that's practically a guarantee of success. As the Resilience prepared for her first test of the hybrid drive system, Santos reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They'd started as scavengers, collecting the debris of dead civilizations. Now they were pioneers, proving that the greatest strength wasn't in perfection, but in the willingness to take the best from everywhere and make it into something new. The stars awaited, full of possibilities that no single species could imagine alone. But together, human chaos and Vel'thari order, organic intuition and crystalline precision, they might just build something worthy of the infinite universe that surrounded them. After all, there was no such thing as junk, only components waiting for the right application. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more journeys. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next adventure.